Over the weekend, the navies of Russia and China ended 3 weeks of joint drills and patrols. Russia said the exercises in the Pacific Ocean covered everything from replenishment of supplies at sea to anti-submarine drills and sea rescue training. China said the drills weren't aimed at a quote third party. That didn't prevent Japan, however, from scrambling fighter jets on Friday after Russian patrol aircraft were seen off the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea. And joining me now for more context is Ian Chong. He's a political scientist at the National University of Singapore and specializes in international relations in the Asia-Pacific and Chinese foreign policy. Professor Chong, in addition to this latest patrol, there was a joint air patrol just last July over the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea, in addition to at least 5 military exercises last year. Question is, why are China and Russia stepping up military cooperation in the Indo-Pacific?
So with the Russia-China relationship, one of the things that they're trying to do is to counter what they see as U.S. competition and U.S. pressure. And by having their exercises in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, near U.S. allies, I guess it sends a signal that the Russians and the Chinese can together put pressure on Washington, where things may matter for Washington. So I guess that's a shot across the bow to not perhaps push Russia too far in the Ukraine, and also not to push the PRC too far in the Indo-Pacific.
You know, one is signaling and then the other is reality. And the reason I ask that is because do you actually see a scenario, for instance, in which Russian naval ships come to the aid of Chinese ships in the South China Sea, for example?
So the Russian naval presence in this part of the world, especially in the South China Sea, is far more limited. For them to sustain operations, they would need a lot of resupply right now. Russia is quite stretched because of its aggression in Ukraine. So I guess what we could see more is perhaps some sort of collaboration or assistance in Northeast Asia, more so than Southeast Asia. But even then, it would complicate the calculus for the United States, for South Korea, for Japan, and indeed probably Taiwan as well. So I guess that is the point, right? To complicate the calculus for an adversary.
But how much of a threat are they really, China and Russia put together? I mean, given Russia's strained naval and land forces as a result of the Ukraine war?
So in this part of the world, the PRC is far more serious in terms of putting pressure. But the Russians, I suppose, have fairly capable naval vessels, submarines, that could, if used, put pressure. But, I mean, that is really further off. Right now, what we're seeing a lot more of is this sort of gray zone activity by Chinese maritime militia, by PRC Coast Guard. So right now, it's all signaling, I think, in an event where you would see actual Russian involvement, that would be pretty high up the escalation ladder. So a lot of other things would probably need to happen first. That in that case, whether the war in Ukraine is still ongoing or whether some other developments have overtaken it, that's less known.
Talk to us a bit about the kind of joint patrols, exercises and drills that we are seeing. I mean, what scenario are the two militaries preparing for?
So it appears, well, there've been a range of things, right? They've been having exercises on land as well, but I suppose it's to show that they can operate together when it comes to the air and maritime space, which is very, very important in the Indo-Pacific. Much of the Indo-Pacific is a maritime theater as opposed to a land-based theater. And so to show that they can operate together, that they can, provide assistance to each other, provide cover for each other as they conduct operations. I guess that's the real thing that they've been doing. And more than anything else, it's really a show of force rather than anything that's quite concrete at the moment. I mean, we haven't seen, truly, very, very sophisticated kinds of, say, anti-submarine or sort of joint kinds of preparations for war. So right now, it's not up at that level. I suppose what we are seeing is a scaling up, possibly, but more than that, it's really the show of force that matters.
Aren't we seeing similar responses from other countries in terms of joint exercises as well? Because you have the US-South Korea drills, for example, starting today. There's talk of new drills between South Korea, Japan, and the US, and we've not even looked at other joint exercises involving India, the US, Philippines, Japan, and other nations.
There's also the Japan, US, Australia joint exercise that's happening in the South China Sea now. So, yes, certainly there's a lot of posturing right now. There's something to the posturing, actually. So, on the US side of the US and its allies, the point is deterrence, right? They are trying to signal to the PRC and then also to Russia that should they decide to upset the peace, should they decide to change the status quo unilaterally, the costs and the risks will be extremely high. Now, for the PRC and the Russian side, I suppose what they are trying to show is that, yes, there may be all this deterrence, but, to be able to carry it off, it's going to be pretty costly and difficult on the US and the Allied side as well. So what we're seeing is this sort of, as I said, slow sort of ramping up of activity, which suggests a sort of rising tension in the region.
Rising tensions in the region. Is the region headed to maritime conflict, you think?
So a lot will come down to whether deterrence works. If deterrence works and there is no incentive to escalate, then a lot of this sort of preparation may actually work for a better end. But deterrence is a delicate game. You could get it wrong. You could overly threaten. You could assure too much. And that could lead the target of your deterrence to act in ways that you've told it not to. So I guess we're all in some ways betting that a lot of the signaling is going to be useful in discouraging any adventurism. But whether that actually works, I mean, in some ways it's a bet.
We'll leave it there, but thank you so much for all that context. Professor Ian Chong from the National University of Singapore. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.